I've always kind of been the guy that has told you what I believe works. And I've shifted ideology. I've learned things as I've gone. And I'll be the first one to say, hey, you remember that? Well, turns out for many, that might not have been the most optimal thing to do. So I did or do what I always do. I roll up my damn sleeves, delve into it, research the shit out of it, and apply it in real time to myself and a large group of people who are willing to do so within my coaching community, both online and in the gym. And we meticulously track the results. I get a lot of real feedback, which I think is the most important feedback you can get. How much weight have you lost? How do you feel? How's your performance? How's your sleep? Go get your blood work done. What do the numbers say? And that's one of the things that led me to making a shift out of the very hardcore, cult-like carnivore community, which is really kind of how it's shifted into. I've talked about that in the past. And I've said recently, if your diet has a name, it might be a shitty diet, So when people ask me what kind of diet I consume, my standard reply is single ingredient whole foods, because I truly believe this. And I don't think you'll disagree when I put a small qualifier to this, that we could cure the obesity crisis if everyone just started by consuming single ingredient whole foods, even if there's carbohydrates in them, which carbohydrates are not the devil. And I think a lot of people are waking up to that. And there are a lot of grifters out there in the influencer community that like to scare the living shit out of people because they tend to profit off scaring the living shit out of people, because they scare the living shit out of people so shittily, is that even a word? That they end up buying their ebook or their program or whatever and shelling out an ass ton of money. And then they just find that it's maybe not sustainable, too restrictive, a little weird. They don't feel so great. This hasn't happened or whatever. And they abandon it. And then they throw their hands in the air and they're like, what the hell do I do now? I have never really been in the business of calling out other people in this space. I mean, the coaching and fitness and wellness and training space, nutrition space. But I will show this one. And this one really irritated the piss out of me. For factual, real physiological reasons, and for the detrimental psychological effect that it can have on the people that are watching her and putting their faith into her, because she's very convincing, which typically that's the number one prerequisite for being successful on the internet, is just being convincing. These days, somebody can bang out 3 or 4 questions on ChatGPT, get an ass ton of answers, spew those answers on the internet, make it sound really, really convincing, and convince people that it's something that they've really been digging into and applying for years and blah, blah, blah. And then they starve themselves to death and, do whatever to achieve some kind of a level of fitness, or they may be just a little genetic freak, or they may be sauced to the gills, whatever the case may be. And some of them may work really hard, but they also understand that they have to work way harder than what they're saying they did, because a lot of people don't want to buy hard. I sell hard. So I know that I pigeonhole myself right out of the gate, because if you're working with me, there's going to be a massive level of effort that you're going to have to apply in order, if you truly want to change your life, because it doesn't come easy. Hard work, consistency, dedication, grit, effort, pain, suffering, all of these things are required in the formula to get the best results of your life. But anyway, this particular influencer, now let me say this, so some of you out there don't get your panties all up in a bunch, as it sometimes happens, and then you get mad at me for just being the messenger. But I want to play this clip real fast. And let me also, again, say from the outset, there are some things she says that I agree with. For sure. There are some things that I would agree with. But then every once in a while, and very often, she'll throw up something like this, and it makes my blood boil, because it's just absolute fear-mongering, exquisite bullshit. Like this.
It takes very little fruit. We're talking like a half an apple a day, and you be putting on visceral fat. And it's because we just don't need that much glucose. Our bodies just aren't designed to utilize that huge of a glucose hit. And when you're eating meat and you're using that process of gluconeogenesis to break down the meat to glucose, and you're activating that process, anything extra outside of that, it just gets turned into fat.
So there you go. So let me get this straight. If you eat 1/2, not even a whole apple, if you eat 1/2 of an apple, it immediately, her word, converts to visceral fat. Immediately. No matter who you are, no matter what your history, it immediately turns to visceral fat. That's the fat that you don't see. It's the fat around your organs, the internal fat, which can be very damaging. Half of an apple. Just for context, half of an apple contains roughly 1.5 to 2 grams of glucose. Then there's a few grams of fructose, which generally will get stored into the liver if needed. And then there's a little bit of sucrose. All in all, we're talking about, and she said glucose. So if she says the glucose in half of an apple will immediately turn to visceral fat on your body, that is so wrong for the overwhelming majority of the human population. It's unfathomable. Okay. She's one of these grifters that sort of glommed on to the low carb primal, that's her thing, communities, and is convincing, to the best I can understand from her content, mostly women, to try to rescue them by telling them basically, if you secrete any insulin, if you secrete insulin, it all turns to fat. It's the driver of fat. It's the number one driver of fat. I did reply to one of her posts, and I normally don't, because why waste your time? I've got bigger things to worry about than replying on social media to people who are doing what they do, because there's too many of them and you can't stop that train wreck. And I said, to quote The Princess Bride, you keep using that word, meaning insulin, but I'm not sure you know what it means. And I truly don't. I think she's holding on to what a lot in the carnivore keto space, what those people echo over and over again. And I've never got this, even all my years in the keto community, in the carnivore community, demonizing insulin, a very powerful, potent, necessary hormone that we all have, and we have it for a reason. The thing about insulin is it is a storage hormone. So she got that part right. That was about it. So when you consume, let's say, carbohydrate, and let's go back to what I was talking about earlier, single ingredient whole foods, not garbage, not pizza, not ice cream, not fast food, not carbohydrate that is mixed simultaneously with a competing energy source, a competing crappy energy source like industrial seed oils and things like that, especially. But when you consume a carbohydrate, insulin is secreted in the short term. It's a natural thing that the body does. And oftentimes the body will secrete just as much insulin consuming fat as it does consuming some carbohydrate. And when the body secretes this insulin is your body's very intelligent. It now sees the presence of carbohydrate. It understands that it now has to do something with the carbohydrate. So your body, this very intelligent mechanism, is going to choose to store that carbohydrate in the best place where it can be utilized to benefit you, in the muscle as muscle glycogen. It's not immediately going to turn a half of a freaking apple or a serving of rice or a sweet potato into visceral fat or subcutaneous fat or body fat in general immediately. That's not the way the body works. Now, if you are, as I've said for years, very metabolically deranged, you have a metabolic disorder from years of abuse, and because of that, your endocrine system is damaged, then yes, those people, if they go through a period of time reducing their level of carbohydrate or effective energy from carbohydrate, then that can help correct some of the damage. But the issue here is I've had metabolically broken clients that I work with. I work in the South in a town called Hickory, North Carolina. And, down here, Cracker Barrel is, fine cuisine. People around here eat fast food, literally, not exaggerating. Some, and I know some of these people, eat fast food or fast food delivered to them via like DoorDash or Uber Eats 3 times a day. That's how they consume food. That's how they feed their families. So I get it. It's not like I'm working in Costa Rica or in San Diego, on the beach around glistening fitness bunnies and athletes and surfers who might be more health conscious. And I have taken these metabolically deranged people for decades. I've been doing this for 30 years. And we've taken a considerable amount of time, or even for some, a not so long amount of time. We have reduced the level of carbohydrate and we have corrected that metabolic damage. And we have slowly reintroduced some of that carbohydrate back into their diet, making sure that they also don't have very, very high levels of fat. And the damage gets corrected. They can consume certain carbohydrates, the ones that are from single ingredient whole foods, and they thrive and do just fine. In fact, and this is the part that nobody believes, even though it's happening constantly, and you're seeing it now all over social media, sort of the ruse of if you have any carbohydrates at all, it's basically a death sentence. We're learning that that is just silly. Human beings have been eating carbohydrate to some degree throughout the entirety of human existence. There's never been a tribe, culture, society, or whatever that have been long-term zero carb. That's a new thing. And it became a new thing because some people realized that for decades they were completely destroying themselves on a Western diet. They had destroyed everything, incurred severe metabolic distress, and they had to limit some of that consumption of carbohydrate, where the most important thing they could have done and do is limit the intake of processed foods, fast foods, restaurant foods, and primarily within all that, the intake of industrial seed oils, which is hands down the biggest detriment to your health that you could possibly consume. I have witnessed and work with in real time now many clients that I engage with on a very regular basis, some face-to-face, 2, 3, 4 times a week in my gym, and many online that I check in with on Zoom, talk to on Messenger. And we have worked through these issues. We have reintroduced single ingredient whole food carbohydrates in the right amount, at the right time, and the right frequency. And I have had the overwhelming majority of them get nothing but positive outcomes. The positive outcomes generally are increased performance, better recovery, and a lot of them, I know this is going to sound kooky town, are more efficient at lowering their body fat percentage and changing their body composition. Now, here's the caveat to that. You don't want to have competing energy sources. You don't want to have a high intake of carbohydrate and fat occurring at the same time. That can cause problems. You have 2 competing energy sources. You have an energy component from carbohydrate and you have an energy component from fat, and high concentrations of both combined at the same time can produce diminishing returns. So you have to kind of choose your energy source and act accordingly. So these people that are taking in 120, 150 grams of fat every day, thinking, you ought to eat fat to burn fat, which is silly. If that's working for you and you're very low carb, then I would absolutely advise you to continue doing that. But there are so many out there who come to me and seek me out, just like they did back in the onset of the ketogenic days, where the majority of my clientele came from people who asked me to literally fix their ketogenic diet because they were now putting on weight and felt like shit. And in almost all of those cases, the change came from lowering the amount of fat that they were taking in and increasing their protein and actually bringing their carbs up a little bit, or doing occasional structured carbohydrate refeeds. And it worked like a charm for nearly everyone. That's how I got on the internet. That's how I got a level of popularity online, is because I became the fix my keto diet guy for a period of time. And then it just kind of went from there. And the same has been happening in the carnivore community. There are some, not all, which I've said 1,000 times, who are starting to get these diminishing returns coming from a zero or near zero carbohydrate intake. Seeing it happen all the time. They're coming to me in droves. As clients on Messenger, in consults that I do, I'm getting direct messages from people who are just thanking me by saying, hey, once I switched to all single ingredient whole foods, I was able to add some carbohydrate back. I actually lowered my fat a little bit in conjunction with the increase of carbohydrate. And now I'm performing phenomenal. I'm losing body fat. I feel great. I'm sleeping great. More specifically, if you want to know some of the more specific reasons or specific issues, especially women have when they come to me, it is generally always something like this. They message me, talk to me, consult with me, Zoom with me, whatever. And in almost every instance, and I've done dozens and dozens of these over the last year, they will tell me, I did a carnivore diet, nearly zero carb. It worked in the short term. And then after a certain amount of time, my performance started to decrease in the gym. Now, these are active people generally that I work with. I'm not talking about the cubicle sitting, morbidly obese, metabolically broken people. Most people that come to me train. They take care of themselves. They exercise. They're active. And when these large group of people, especially women, come to me and say, I did a very, very low carb for X number of time, and then I got to a point where my performance sucked, I was having major sleep issues or insomnia, and my hair started falling out. Some reported losing their monthly cycle, and just a general lackluster, diminishing returns sort of scenario. And they absolutely couldn't figure it out. And I said, this has become a common thing. Many people are not suited for super long-term zero carb, just like we now know that super long-term ketosis is not a good idea. It's good to bump out, whether it be from excessive amounts of protein, which triggers gluconeogenesis, or, which seems to make a little bit more sense to me, adding back some single ingredient whole food carbohydrates like we have eaten for a millennia, for thousands of years. So when I work with these people, oftentimes it's something along the lines of, hey, here's what I want you to try. I want you to consume 50 grams of carbohydrates 3 to 4 days a week starting now. And if you can do that preferably around your workouts, that might be even better. And then let me know how that goes. Let me know how that step one goes. I'm not exaggerating when I tell you it was a floodgate of people after a couple of weeks coming back to me and saying, oh my gosh, everything is improving. You see, it's not carbs that's causing the problems necessarily, unless you're eating massive excessive amounts. And those massive excessive amounts are usually coming from highly processed, low quality garbage carbs that also are mixed with a high concentration of crappy fats. And that's where the most high level metabolic distress is coming from. Again, think pizza, ice cream, fast food, crap. Things in packages, boxes, garbage. Bodybuilding legend coach Justin Harris, who I actually interviewed on this channel, very intelligent man, has been doing this for decades at a very high level of success, sort of tongue-in-cheek, but not really, often says nobody gets fat on meat and rice. Or more specifically, he started saying chicken and rice, so now he says meat and rice. And what he's trying to say is if you're eating single ingredient whole foods, you're bringing in a level of carbohydrate that your body is going to secrete insulin and store in the muscle as glycogen for effective energy. You just don't want to take in so much that it's an excessive amount that spills over, that your body has to deal with by going through the expensive physiological process of storing it as body fat. Conversely, you don't want to take in a massive amount of fat, even in a low carb environment, to where you take in so much that it spills over beyond the energy requirements of your body. The body has nothing to do with the excess, so it has to what? Store it as fat. And storing excess fat as body fat is actually an inexpensive physiological process for the most part. So there have been cultures throughout our human history who have thrived on consuming regular amounts of carbohydrate. They're just not like eating copious amounts of it, and they're not eating it from absolute garbage foods. If you look at Pacific Island cultures and Asian cultures throughout the course of history, some of these people live on 65% carbohydrate, mainly white rice, with some meat consumption mixed in with that. They're some of the most long-lived people ever. Their rate of disease is very, very low. They're very healthy, and they live a very long time. If you go south of the equator, if you're in South America, Mexico, areas, like I said, south of the equator, a lot of these people subsist on corn because that's what they have. Oftentimes it's geographical and it's based on culture. And it wasn't until some of these areas started to get infected with Western food that's when you started to see the rate of health decline. So again, you have to understand that it's not the carbohydrate. It's the type of carbohydrate, excessive amounts of it, combined with a high level or a high concentration of dietary fat as well. It's no secret. Like if you look at the physique competitive community, bodybuilders, even you could say CrossFitters to some degree, professional athletes, Tour de France cyclists, they eat a lot of carbs. And they're not like dying, they're performing. They're using that effective energy as an immediate output component to fuel high intensity muscular contractions. And they're not dying and they're not in poor health. It's the garbage food that many of them often shift to consuming post-athletic career, where the damage starts to accrue. So I can use my own self as an example. In my bodybuilding pursuits, and even in some of my athletic pursuits when I wasn't bodybuilding, I was on a hypercarnivore diet. Hypercarnivore diet means roughly 70% or more of your food is coming from animal-based sources, which leaves in the neighborhood of 30% coming from foods outside the animal-based world, which could be rice, potato, sourdough bread, vegetables, fruit, can be any of those things. And I did well with that. But me personally, in 2025, when I competed after 4 years off, which is hard to do, and compound that with the fact that I was 56 years old when I chose to compete again after a 4-year layoff, I adopted a carb cycling protocol popularized by people like Justin Harris and other top level bodybuilding coaches in the industry, because that's what they all do. And if you went out and polled 10,000 competitive bodybuilders, I would argue or guess that 9,950 of them are all using some form of carb cycling, because it just seems to work, and it worked great for me. What did I find? I was able to retain and keep muscle mass and get leaner faster on a carb cycling diet. I elevated my carbohydrate. I had a moderate amount on training days. I had a lower amount on non-training days, and I had a what we call an overcompensation or a high intake day on my hardest training day of the week, which was always leg day. And through that meticulous manipulation of carbohydrate based on output and performance, it's always hard to get to 4% body fat, but it was far easier to do this using carbohydrate as a lever because the reaction to adjustments in carbohydrate intake are very immediate. If you're taking in a little too much carbs, you can immediately dial down the amount and you can start to see changes happen fairly quickly within days. That's why bodybuilders will front load carbohydrates the week before they go on stage. So if they're going on stage on Saturday, they will start to carb load on, say, the Monday, and then they'll add a little bit more on Tuesday, which is what I did. And then I add a little bit more on Wednesday, which I did. Add a little bit more on Thursday. And that way you can get to a point where if you feel that you have the look that you want to stand on stage with, then you can dial it back or hold right there because you found it. And then you cruise into the show day and just walk on stage and hopefully dominate. Conversely, if you start carb loading and you see that it's starting to spill over a little bit, you look a little softer, then you just dial it back a little bit. And you see those changes happen fairly immediately. What I found as a coach and as a competitor, when I was using fat as a dominant energy component, I found the adjustment process was far more difficult and it took far more time to see micro adjustments happening within the physique by using fat as a lever. And then coming off of my contest, where I was 191 pounds and absolutely peeled, when I went and raised my intake of food, which one does because you can't maintain that, it's horrible. I have found that keeping a lean, muscular physique has been far easier by continuing the carb cycling approach post-show, just in greater amounts. And I found the level, like right now, I'm probably sitting at about 212 pounds. I still have exposed abdominals. I'm still vascular. I perform great. I can crush it in the gym and then go out and do a 45-minute brutal ruck. And I feel great. I perform great. And I'm still lean. I'm 57 years old because I figured out the formula of intake and output that is conducive to me being high-performing, muscular, lean, and having a level of body composition that I like, that not only feels great, but is aesthetically pleasing. It was difficult for me to do that in the past when I wasn't using this approach. Now, I'm not saying everybody go do this. There are some out there that thrive on a very low-carb diet or a carnivore diet or a ketogenic diet. And to those people, I say, keep doing what you're doing. But it doesn't have to be that way. That's not the only approach. And so many influencers out there get on the internet, on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, and whatever, and they absolutely lie to your face and tell you this is the only way, or you will get fat, or you will get metabolically deranged, or you will have this problem or that problem. And then some go as far as to say, if you eat half of an apple, it's going to immediately store as visceral fat. That's insanity. And then what happens is you get these poor people out there. And again, this woman I'm referring to with the half an apple bullshit, she markets to primarily women. So you get some broken, depressed woman out there who's tried so many things. She wants to lose weight. Nothing has really worked. And maybe she's having cleaner sources of protein. Maybe she's switched to single ingredient whole foods. She's cleaned up her diet. Maybe she's still having some carbohydrate, but maybe it's coming from cleaner sources. You're not eating too much. And then she flips on Instagram and sees this woman say, hey, ladies, if you want to be lean and not freaking die, just half of an apple is going to add visceral fat to your body and it's going to kill you. Well, then these poor women throw their hands in the air and say, well, holy crap, I can't do freaking anything. Nothing's right. Carbs are bad. Fat's bad. High protein's bad. Low protein's bad. I can't eat an apple. Can't eat fruit. I can't eat rice. I can't eat a potato. Yes, you can. You can. And people have been consuming these foods for centuries with great results and optimal health and great longevity. We have to bring some sanity back to the nutrition space And the internet is like a gun. You can hurt somebody with it, or you can protect someone with it. And we have to start listening, have to stop listening to all this crazy noise that's out there and all the fear mongering, because that's what it all is. I will terrify you into buying my program. I will terrify you into purchasing my ebook. I will terrify you into downloading this. I will terrify you into a consultation or online coaching or whatever. But most of these people hide behind short-term programs with a high price tag. And regardless of whether you get results or not, even if you fall off into the wayside, they've got their $3,500 or $5,000 or whatever it is. A ticket price that I don't charge for any of my programs. And my programs offer reasonable, sound, logical, rational assistance in real time with real people, working through the details, finding what works, and understanding that if the diet you're on is absolutely not sustainable, it's not going to work. I have found a way of consuming food that is pleasurable, sustainable. It still has to be dialed in. I still have to pay attention to my division of macros. I still have to understand that depending on the particular goal during the calendar year, things have to be titrated down or titrated up. I understand this. But it has become a very sustainable way of me eating. No longer are the days, if my wife and I want to have a damn sweet potato with our steak on a Saturday night, do I have to say, no, sir, I am a, long-term member of the carnivore club, and I cannot, subsist on any carbohydrate. Yes, I'd be, stricken from the club. It's ridiculous. People have been eating sweet potatoes for centuries. People have been eating rice for centuries. They've been eating sourdough bread for centuries. They've been eating fruit forever. They've been eating root vegetables, honey, forever. And I think if we dropped you on this earth 10,000 years ago, where people were consuming carbohydrates, you're still not going to find a metabolically deranged, obese, fat person. Because it was it was so glaringly obvious that the decline in health and the rise in obesity and diabetes and heart disease was linear with the time of seed oil development and consumption and the high rate of processed garbage food that came into the nutritional landscape. It's undeniable. And again, let me just say one more time, and I'm not trying to beat my chest over this thing, and I'm not trying to convince anybody of anything. I'm just saying you don't have to join a meat cult or completely remove a macronutrient off the face of the earth that people have been consuming since the dawn of man because some influencer says so. Now, if what they're doing truly is working for them, great. And if you're trying it and it's working for you, great. But if a time comes around where you start to get diminishing returns or it gets too restrictive or too cult-like, don't be afraid to raise your voice and question the process and be open to making adjustments to find a version of the way you consume food that is sustainable and helps you with your efforts in body composition, performance, health, longevity, whatever. I've talked about these kind of things for a long time now, but I see so much of it still to this day. However, just like in politics now, you're seeing the veil being lifted off of what is really happening in the world, what's really happening with the elites that control the world. You're starting to see some major pushback. People are pulling away from the current system. We see the man behind the curtain and it's not pretty. And we realize there's so much corruption that you can't even prosecute the corruption because the prosecutors are among the corrupt. So it's happening, I think, in the nutrition realm where we're saying, hey, this tribe of people that were screaming for the rooftops that this food is going to make me fat and diseased, turns out it probably won't. And in fact, I may be able to consume a decent amount of it and have great performance, still have wonderful health, great longevity, and it's far more sustainable and enjoyable for me. And I don't have to be part of a cult. So just question these things. And if you need help, reach out and let me know and I can help you. I'm not going to lie to you. You may not agree with me, or what I say may not be the most optimal for you, but I'm not going to lie to you. I'm going to tell you what I think might work well for you. And then we try that. And then we may even have to make a couple of adjustments until we dial it in to work for you, a way that has you performing well, looking great, feeling great, and that you can enjoy. So beware the grifters. They are everywhere. They are in politics. They're in religion. They're in the food industry. They're in the training community. They're everywhere. In every industry, you have people that are capitalizing on people's failure. They're capitalizing on people's insecurities and misunderstanding of what actually works. And people are looking for leadership. They want somebody to follow that is not going to bullshit them. So consider that. Leave something in the comments. Let me know what you think. And until next time, get out there and enjoy your day and push away the distractions.